02:00 a.m. My brother-in-law had called 20 times, demanding I come over to my mother-in-law's house immediately because of a huge emergency. My husband grabbed my wrist, telling me to stay home and not to go. I listened to him and stayed. The next day, a horrific truth came to light that drained the blood from my face. That night, I was in a deep sleep when the frantic buzzing of the phone on my nightstand jolted me awake. The bedroom was pitch black, illuminated only by the flashing screen, casting a cold, eerie blue light against the ceiling. I reached for the phone, my eyes still heavy with sleep. But the moment I saw the caller ID, I was wide awake. It was Derek, my husband's younger brother. To be honest, Derek never called at a decent hour, let alone in the middle of the night. He only ever remembered I existed when he needed money, when he needed me to put in a good word for him with Quinn, my husband, or when he messed up and needed someone to clean up his radioactive fallout. I stared at the screen, my heart beating faster. 21 missed calls, followed by a barrage of text messages, short and panicked. "Hannah, get over to Mom's right now. It's a massive emergency. If you don't hurry, we're all dead." I sat bolt upright. My immediate thought was that my mother-in-law, Lorraine, or my father-in-law, Arthur, had collapsed, or that there had been a home invasion. Even though I had swallowed a lot of mistreatment during my years marrying into this family, they were still my in-laws, still Quinn's mother and brother. I threw off the covers and stepped barefoot onto the cold hardwood floor, reaching for my cardigan behind the door. But before I could take a second step, Quinn's hand clamped down hard on my wrist. He had woken up at some point. In the dark, his jaw was clenched, his eyes locked on the glowing phone screen in my hand. Before I could speak, he said in a low voice, "Stay home. Don't go." I froze, caught between anxiety and irritation. "What are you talking about?" Derek called over 20 times. He said there's a huge emergency at Mom's. "What if something happened to your parents?" Quinn didn't let go. He looked at me for a long time, his voice hoarse but absolute. "Derek would never call you in the middle of the night unless he was planning to drag you into his mess." That sentence stopped me dead in my tracks. In that split second, the phone vibrated again, hammering against my nerves. It was Derek again. I looked at Quinn, answered the call, and put it on speaker. Derek's voice immediately burst through, trembling and aggressive. "Hannah, get over to Mom's right now, hurry up. If you don't come, Mom's never going to forgive you." I gripped the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "Derek, what is going on? Are Mom and Dad okay? Do I need to call 911? He went silent for a few seconds. That silence made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Then he stammered, Just get over here. I need you here. I just need you to be present." Quinn snatched the phone from my hand. His voice dropped to a terrifying register. "Derek, what the hell did you do?" Total silence on the other end. All we could hear was heavy, panicked breathing mixed with a faint background noise, like the wind or distant traffic. Quinn asked again, his words grinding through his teeth. "I asked you, what did you do?" No answer. Derek hung up. I stood paralyzed in the middle of the room, goosebumps breaking out all over my arms. If his parents were truly in danger, why wouldn't Derek explain? If someone needed saving, why not call an ambulance? Why was he insisting I come over, emphasizing that he specifically needed me present? Less than a minute later, my phone lit up again. This time, it was a text from my mother-in-law, Lorraine. "A good daughter-in-law knows her duty to her husband's family. Don't make me drive over there to get you." Every word of that short text weighed like a stone on my chest. Not a single mention of Arthur having a heart attack, or her fainting, or anyone being hurt. It was just sheer coercion, leveraging my duty, using that exact tone I had memorized over the last 4 years. A daughter-in-law must know her place. A daughter-in-law must sacrifice. A daughter-in-law must carry the burden for the family. I turned to look at Quinn. By then, he had walked over to the bedroom door, locked the deadbolt, and tossed my car keys into the top drawer of the dresser. The action made me both confused and terrified. I asked quietly, "What are you doing?" Quinn turned back to me, his eyes bloodshot, but his voice was like steel. "You are not going anywhere tonight. If there's a real emergency, I will go. It's not your place." I was speechless. Outside, the night was pitch black. Inside, My phone occasionally buzzed, making my heart skip a beat every single time. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands ice cold, my mind a tangled mess. Part of me feared I was being paranoid, terrified that a real tragedy was happening at my in-laws and I wasn't there. But the other part of me, my waking rationale, started to hear the glaring red flags in every call, every text, and every word Derek and Lorraine had used. That night, I listened to Quinn and stayed home. I had no idea that this single decision kept me from stepping into a trap set entirely in the dark. And I certainly never expected the devastating news that would hit us just a few hours later at dawn, news that would drain the color from my face, and leave Quinn standing there like a man who had just seen a cliff drop off right at his front door. To understand why a 2:00 a.m. phone call made Quinn so fiercely defensive, you have to look back at the years since I married into his family. Quinn and I had been married for 4 years. My family wasn't well off. My dad passed away early, and my mom, Martha, ran a small produce stand at the local farmer's market to put me through college. When I got married, my mom just held my hand and said, "When you marry into their family, just be a good, decent person. But never let them use our lack of money as a weapon against you." At the time, I thought she was overthinking it. I loved Quinn, and he loved me. But life's hardest trials rarely stem from a couple's love. They stem from how outsiders look at your background. My in-laws were very comfortable financially. Arthur owned a successful local lumber and hardware store. Lorraine managed the finances from home, and Derek, Quinn's youngest brother, was the golden child. From day one, Lorraine spoke to me with a tone that hovered between pity and charity. In front of relatives at Thanksgiving or Christmas, she would smile brightly, but every sentence stung. "Our Hannah is such a sweet girl. Her family might not have much, but at least she knows her place." Once, during a family dinner, she loudly proclaimed, "Honestly, she's lucky to have bagged a guy like Quinn. It's the ultimate upgrade for her family." Everyone laughed like it was a great joke. I just kept my head down, poking at my salad, a lump in my throat making it impossible to swallow. I endured it partly out of love for Quinn, and partly because I didn't want my mother to hear rumors that her daughter was causing drama. I figured if I just lived well and did my part, they'd eventually see me differently. But some people don't view kindness as a virtue. They see it as a weakness to be exploited. Derek was the prime example. He was 6 years younger than Quinn, in his mid-20s, and couldn't hold down a job. One day, he wanted to open a coffee shop. The next, he was dropshipping sneakers online. He'd quit after a week. Yet he drove a pristine sports car, always had the newest iPhone, wore clothes with massive designer logos, and hung out with a party-hard crowd. He'd go out every night, stumble home near dawn, constantly reeking of alcohol and weed. Yet, in Lorraine's eyes, Derek was just her sweet, naive baby boy who needed protecting. Whenever he ran out of money, she'd slip him cash. When Quinn called her out on it, she'd snap, "He's young. He'll make mistakes and learn. Are you really going to nickel and dime your own brother?" But if I bought my own mother a nice bottle of vitamins, Lorraine would immediately make a passive-aggressive comment. "Money from this household shouldn't be funneled back to your side, honey. Your mom is used to getting by on less. You shouldn't take all her burdens on yourself." Those light, breezy comments cut deep. I wasn't stingy with my money. I just hurt seeing my hard-working mother looked down upon. My mom worked her fingers to the bone and never asked anyone for a dime. Yet, in my mother-in-law's mouth, my mom's poverty was treated like a moral failing. I brought it up with Quinn once. He stayed silent for a long time before saying, "I know it hurts, Hannah, but my mom has always talked like that." The more you argue, the bigger a deal she makes out of it. I understood he was in a tough spot, but his silence often made me feel incredibly alone. As for Derek, he never respected me. When he needed a favor, it was Hannah, my favorite sister-in-law. When I didn't do what he wanted, he'd smirk and call me the trailer park princess. Once, he looked at a canvas tote bag of fresh vegetables my mom had sent me and scoffed. "Wow, your family is really pinching pennies, sending vegetables by the bunch. But hey, marrying into this house was a real lottery win for you, huh?" My hands gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. I was about to snap back, but under the table, Quinn grabbed my hand. His grip was warm, but it didn't comfort me. It was just another reminder that, once again, I had to swallow my pride. Quinn wasn't a coward, and he loved me, but he knew exactly how blindly his mother defended Derek. If anyone criticized Derek, Lorraine would burst into tears, list everything she'd ever sacrificed to raise them, and turn the critic into an ungrateful monster. And so, the tension between me and my in-laws never erupted into massive shouting matches. It just smoldered like coals under ash. Outsiders thought I had a great marriage, a loving husband, and wealthy in-laws. But only those inside the house knew the truth. I was kept in a bizarre limbo, never close enough to be protected, but close enough to be summoned whenever there was heavy lifting to do. During family events, I was the one grocery shopping, cooking, and doing the dishes. When Derek racked up credit card debt, Lorraine would beg me to talk Quinn out of getting angry. When they needed someone to play peacemaker with an annoyed aunt, I was pushed to the front line. But when there were praises to be sung, or money to be shared, I was instantly treated like an outsider. That was why, when Derek called me 20 times at 2:00 a.m., Quinn didn't hear a cry for help. He smelled a very familiar kind of trouble. And even though I still had a sense of duty, I began to understand why my husband had locked the door. To Derek and Lorraine, I was never truly family. I was just a body they could call upon, a name, a face, or a back broad enough to dump their burdens onto. Truthfully, before that fateful night, Derek had caused his fair share of disasters. But every time he messed up, the people who had to swallow the bitter pills were Quinn and me, not him. Lorraine always had an excuse ready. He's just a kid. He hasn't matured yet. But how long can a 20-something man who parties, borrows money, wrecks other people's property, and casually brushes it off be considered just a kid? I remember clearly the time Derek borrowed Quinn's commuter sedan to go to a friend's birthday party. Quinn didn't want to lend it because he needed it for work, and it had just been in the shop. But Derek kept whining, and Lorraine chimed in. "You're brothers. Why are you being so possessive over a piece of metal? What kind of older brother are you?" Quinn finally tossed him the keys. Derek left in the afternoon and didn't return until near dawn. The car was parked in the driveway, the entire passenger side keyed with a deep scratch, the side mirror dangling by a wire, and the front bumper heavily dented. Quinn took one look at it, and his face went dark. He asked Derek what he hit. Derek just shrugged, still half asleep. I swerved to avoid a stray dog and sideswiped a wall. "What's the big deal? Stop overreacting." His "what's the big deal" was weightless to him, but the repair bill ended up costing nearly half of Quinn's monthly paycheck. I couldn't hold my tongue and said, "Derek, if you borrow your brother's car and wreck it, the least you could do is apologize." Before Derek could even open his mouth, Lorraine whipped her head toward me. "As a sister-in-law, you shouldn't be so petty. He didn't do it on purpose. Why are you forcing him to grovel?" I stood there, dumbfounded, wondering how my husband and I took the financial hit, yet I was the one being reprimanded. Another time, I left a few $100s in an envelope in the living room drawer to pay for my niece's tutoring the next morning. By evening, the money was gone. Derek was the only one who had dropped by. I asked him very gently, not accusing him, just asking if he had seen the envelope. He was lounging on the sofa, playing on his phone, smirked and said, "Yeah, I took it as an advance. I'll pay you back in a few days. We're family. Stop acting like you got robbed." I choked on my words. "If you borrow, you ask first." A child knows that, but Derek spoke so casually, as if it were my fault for leaving cash in my own house. I called Lorraine, hoping she'd be fair. Instead, she sighed. "It's just a few bucks, Hannah. Why are you making a federal case out of it? He was strapped for cash. If you're this calculating with your brother-in-law, it's going to make family gatherings very awkward." Her few bucks was money I had worked all week for, a promise I had made to pay someone on time. Things like this happened constantly. The more Derek was defended, the more he treated our house like his personal piggy bank. Once, he brought his frat boy friends to my in-laws' house and drank until 3 a.m. They were screaming, throwing beer cans everywhere, crushing cigarettes into the potted plants on the porch. Sometime around midnight, heavily intoxicated, one of his friends knocked over an antique curio cabinet holding irreplaceable family heirlooms and urns. The next morning, when I went over to help clean, seeing the shattered porcelain and glass all over the floor sent a chill through me. Breaking ancestral items is a massive taboo for the older generation. I thought Lorraine would finally lose it on him. Nope. She just grumpily ordered me to sweep it up. She turned to Quinn and said, "Boys drink too much and get clumsy. He's impulsive, but he has a good heart." A good heart? What good is a good heart if you never admit your mistakes or fix the damage you cause? Gradually, a very bitter truth dawned on me. In Lorraine's eyes, everything Derek did had a sympathetic justification. He wrecked the car because of a dog. He took the money because he was tight. He destroyed the house because he was young. But if I just frowned, or asked a single follow-up question, I was instantly labeled disrespectful, petty, and an unloving sister-in-law. Quinn saw it all. He argued with his mom over Derek plenty of times. Once, he told her straight out, "If you keep covering for him like this, one day he's going to do something so bad that no one will be able to save him." Lorraine collapsed into a chair, crying hysterically about how she sacrificed her body to give birth to them. "I didn't raise you all these years just for you to take your wife's side and bully your baby brother. Ever since you got married, you treat me like garbage." That single sentence was enough to derail the entire conversation. Derek morphed from the guilty party into a poor victim, and I became the wicked witch tearing the brothers apart. After a few incidents like this, the extended family started looking at me differently. At Thanksgiving, an aunt half-joked to me, "Hannah, if Derek does something silly, just guide him gently. Don't make Quinn choose. A smart woman knows how to keep the peace." I just gave a hollow smile. Lorraine had already spun the narrative her way. I was the narrow-minded daughter-in-law driving a wedge between blood relatives. As time went on, Derek got worse. He stopped hiding his disdain for me. He once told me to my face, "Don't think that just because you married Quinn, you're actually part of this family. Outsiders are always outsiders." That sentence stuck with me. Not because it was a new thought, but because he voiced exactly what the whole house thought. I had been there for years, cooking, cleaning, biting my tongue, but in the end, I was just an outsider to be pushed away when convenient. The boiling point hit over the last few months. Derek got mixed up with a crew involved in illegal street racing. He'd come home near dawn, eyes bloodshot, reeking of booze. One night, I overheard him bragging to his friends, "If anything ever happens to me, my mom will buy my way out of it. I'm bulletproof." That statement terrified me. When someone has been shielded for too long, they lose their fear of the law. They only fear not finding a scapegoat. From that point on, Quinn quietly warned me, "Keep your distance from Derek. Do not co-sign anything for him. Do not let him put anything in your name. If he asks you to go somewhere alone with him, absolutely do not go." Back then, I thought Quinn was being overly harsh on his own brother. I thought Derek was a screw-up, but not purely evil. It wasn't until the night he called me over 20 times, his voice shaking, demanding I come to his mother's house at all costs, that I realized Quinn's warning wasn't an overreaction. When overly spoiled people finally commit a real crime, they don't look for a way to repent. They look for someone to take the fall. Back to that fateful night. After Quinn locked the door and refused to let me leave, my phone simply wouldn't rest. The screen lit up, went dark, and lit up again, as if the person on the other end was losing their mind with impatience. When Derek realized I wasn't picking up, he switched to texts. The first text was a dropped pin of my mother-in-law's house. Immediately after, he texted, "Come alone. Don't wake Quinn up. He's a hothead, he'll ruin everything." Reading that made my stomach drop. If this was a normal family emergency, why hide it from Quinn? Quinn was Lorraine's biological son, Derek's older brother. If it was a real crisis, Quinn should be the first one they called, not me. I showed the phone to Quinn. He glanced at it, his face turning thunderous. "See? He doesn't want help. He specifically wants you." Quinn grabbed his own phone and called Derek. It rang endlessly. No one picked up. He called a second, then a third time. Just the cold, rhythmic tone of the dial. But when he signaled me to call from my phone, Derek picked up on the very first ring. That alone made my heart hammer in my chest. I looked at Quinn. He put a finger to his lips, signaling me to keep him a secret. "Keep talking. Don't let him know I'm listening." I forced my voice to sound calm. "Derek, it's me. What on earth is going on that you need me there so badly?" Heavy panting came through the speaker. Derek spoke rapidly, his voice cracking. "Stop asking questions. Just get over here, Mom is waiting. When you get here, you can say whatever you want, as long as you are physically here." I closed my eyes, trying to suppress the trembling in my body. "Is someone hurt? What happened to your parents? Tell me clearly so I know what to expect." Derek went dead silent, a silence so long I could hear the ticking of the wall clock in my living room. Then, he snapped. "Why do you ask so many damn questions? Just come over. If you don't come, whatever happens is on you. Beside me, Quinn clenched his fists. I knew he was trying with all his might to hold himself back. Just then, my phone beeped with an incoming call. It was Lorraine. I clicked over. Before I could even say hello, Lorraine's voice pierced my ear, a mix of sobbing and screaming. Hannah, you are a daughter-in-law of this family. Our family is in crisis, and you're just laying in bed? Do you have no conscience? I choked up. I knew this tone too well. Whenever she wanted to force my hand, she dropped the daughter-in-law guilt trip like an anvil on my head. Mom, I asked. Tell me exactly what's wrong. Is Arthur okay? Are you hurt? Do I need to call 911? She abruptly stopped. Her tone shifted, becoming more frantic. What, 911? Don't call 911. Just get over here first. I'll explain when you get here. Quinn couldn't take it anymore. He ripped the phone from my hand. His voice was so cold it made me shiver. Mom, tell me exactly what happened. If someone is hurt, I am calling the police and an ambulance right now. The line went completely quiet for a few seconds. Then, Lorraine's voice changed. The crying vanished. She hissed, "If you call the cops, you are murdering your own brother." Quinn froze. That sentence felt like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. I stood paralyzed. Murdering your brother? Why would calling the police equal murdering Derek? If Derek hadn't done anything illegal, if they just needed a hand, why were they so terrified of the cops? I looked at Quinn. His face was pale as a ghost, but his eyes were sharper than I'd ever seen them. He hung up the phone, pulled me into the bedroom, and shut the door. From now on, you record every single call, he commanded. Don't argue, don't cry, don't interrogate him. Just let him talk. My voice trembled. Quinn, what the hell is going on? He looked at me, his lips pressed into a thin line. I'm not sure yet, but I know it's something evil. I turned on the call recorder app. Less than a minute later, Derek called again. This time, his panic was bordering on hysteria. Hannah, listen to me, please. Just come over and say one sentence for me. Just tell them you were the one driving. Mom will take care of the rest. My hands went numb. The phone almost slipped from my grasp. I couldn't form a single word. In my head, those words echoed. You were the one driving. Driving when? Driving what vehicle? What happened that he needed me to take the fall for him? Quinn immediately grabbed my wrist, signaling me to stay quiet. He pointed at the recording screen and gave a subtle shake of his head. Keep him talking. I forced my voice not to shake. Derek, I don't understand. Take the fall for what? What car? What happened? Derek let out a ragged breath. He was so panicked he was losing his filter. Stop playing dumb. Just come over. Mom said if you're just physically here, we can spin this. You're a woman, they'll go easy on you. Your family is poor, we'll just pay the damages. Apologize. Mom will get you a lawyer. I bit my lip so hard it hurt. Every word he said sliced like a knife. My family was poor, so I was the perfect human shield. I was a woman, so I could be thrown to the wolves. I was the daughter-in-law, so if the family needed a scapegoat, it was my duty to bow my head. Derek kept rambling, revealing his sickening selfishness. If I get a felony, my life is over. I'm young, I have a future. Hannah, do it for Quinn's sake. Save me this once, I'll owe you my life. I let out a dry, choked laugh that shattered in the quiet bedroom. I asked very slowly, and what about the person you hit? Silence. Absolute silence on the other end. That silence told me everything. Something truly horrific had happened. Someone was severely injured. And from the very beginning, Derek never wanted me there to help anyone. He wanted me to step perfectly into a premeditated narrative his mother had constructed, so that when the sun came up, the name on the police report wouldn't be his. It would be mine. Quinn grabbed the phone and spoke with absolute clarity. Derek, listen to me carefully. Do not ever call my wife again. If you caused an accident, you turn yourself in. If you try to pin this on Hannah, I will personally hand this recording to the detectives. Derek let out a panicked curse, and the call disconnected. The room fell into a heavy silence. I sank onto the bed, my legs turning to jelly. Quinn stood in front of me, his shoulders trembling slightly. I knew he was in agony. No matter how messed up Derek was, It was still his flesh and blood. But that night, caught between his bloodline and his wife's life, he had finally chosen to protect me. As for me, for the first time in 4 years, I realized down to my marrow that these people didn't just view me as an outsider. They viewed me as a sandbag, a shield, someone to be shoved into traffic to protect their golden child. And the most terrifying part was, this was only the beginning. Neither of us slept the rest of the night. We sat in the living room, staring at the phone holding Derek's recorded confession. Outside, it was pitch black, broken only by the occasional roar of a passing car. Inside, the air was so heavy I could hear my own breathing. Around 5:00 a.m., as the sky outside the window shifted to a pale gray, Quinn's phone rang. It was Hank, an acquaintance of Quinn's who lived near Lorraine's subdivision. Quinn answered, and Hank spoke rapidly, his voice shaky. Quinn? Man, I gotta ask. Was Derek riding your mom's motorcycle last night? There was a massive hit and run at the turnoff near your mom's neighborhood. The guy dumped the bike and ran. I jolted upright. Quinn gripped the phone, his voice hoarse. Which bike, Hank? The Red Street motorcycle. I recognized the plates. The one Lorraine always lets Derek ride. The victim is a young girl. They said her name is Maya, on her way to an early shift. She got hit hard, man. The ambulance just rushed her to the ICU. A stranger's name. A stranger's tragedy. But that single sentence felt like a boulder crushing my chest. I pictured her heading to work in the dark, maybe skipping breakfast, wearing a light jacket against the morning chill. And out of nowhere, disaster struck. The person who hit her didn't stay to help, didn't call 911, but ran away to call me to take the blame. Quinn asked a few more questions and hung up. He stood frozen in the living room for a long time, his eyes bloodshot. I looked at him and whispered, "It was really Derek, wasn't it?" He didn't answer right away. He just replayed the audio file from the night before. Derek's voice echoed in the quiet room. "Just tell them you were the one driving. Mom will take care of the rest." Hearing that now, in the daylight, knowing a young woman was fighting for her life, made my blood run cold. A few minutes later, Hank texted Quinn photos of the scene. The red motorcycle lay on its side by the curb, the front fairing shattered, the handlebars scraped raw. Long, violent skid marks scarred the asphalt like gashes on skin. In the distance, a few bystanders were gathered, pointing toward a convenience store across the street. Hank texted. The convenience store's security camera caught the guy, wearing a light gray hoodie and a baseball cap. Quinn stared at the text and muttered, "Light gray hoodie." I knew exactly what he was remembering. A few days ago, Derek had strutted around Lorraine's house in a brand new, expensive gray designer hoodie, posing in the mirror, bragging about his city boy drip. That hoodie was now undeniable evidence. But Hank's next text made my stomach churn. Some people said after the crash, a phone dropped near the bike kept ringing. A little while later, a woman showed up super fast, looked like the owner's family. She didn't call an ambulance or wait for the cops. She just bent down, hastily wiped the handlebars with something, dragged the bike closer to the curb, and took off. I snapped my head toward Quinn. Neither of us spoke, but the exact same image flashed in our minds, Lorraine. The mother who treated her youngest son like royalty. The woman who would turn black to white just to absolve him of responsibility. Quinn held his phone, his knuckles bone white. He said softly, but the words hit the floor like lead weights. "Now I know why they wanted you there." I knew too. If I had rushed over in a panic last night, they would have forced me to touch the motorcycle, to grab the handlebars, to stage a scene where I was the rider. They would have claimed I was so terrified I called Derek for help, or that I borrowed my mother-in-law's bike and crashed it. On a deserted road before dawn, amidst the chaos of an accident, if I showed up at the wrong time, their lies would have easily become half-truths. The thought made me nauseous. I knew my in-laws looked down on me. I knew Lorraine loved Derek blindly, but I never in my wildest nightmares imagined they would frame me for a near-fatal hit-and-run. I wasn't considered family when it came to love and respect, but the second they needed a patsy, I was suddenly the dutiful daughter-in-law. Around 6:00 a.m., a violent pounding erupted at our front door. It wasn't a polite knock, it was frantic, heavy hammering. Quinn went to the door first, and I followed behind him. As he opened it, Lorraine stood on the porch. Her hair was a mess, her face haggard, but her eyes were razor sharp. Beside her was Derek, His lips were pale. He had changed out of the hoodie, but his absolute terror was impossible to hide. Lorraine didn't ask if I was okay, or if I knew what happened. She marched into the entryway, pointed a finger right in my face, and rasped, "You are taking the fall." I stared at her, thinking I'd misheard. "What did you just say?" She grit her teeth, lowering her voice. But every word was venom. "You confess that you were driving. You're a woman, you have a clean record. Worst case scenario, we pay restitution and beg for leniency. Derek is young, he has his whole future ahead of him. If he gets a felony, his life is ruined." I was paralyzed. In that moment, I didn't see my mother-in-law standing before me. I saw a monster perfectly willing to throw an innocent woman off a cliff just to pull her son back up. She spoke of Derek's future as a precious jewel, while my reputation, my freedom, and my life were so cheap they could be traded away like spare change. Derek stood behind her, refusing to meet my eyes. He mumbled, "Hannah, please just help me this one time. Mom said she'll cover the lawyer, the fines. You won't suffer." I let out a bitter laugh, my eyes burning. "I won't suffer? What about the girl named Maya currently bleeding in the ICU? Is she suffering?" Derek shut his mouth. Lorraine immediately snapped, "Worry about yourself first. The girl isn't dead yet. We can handle it with money. Don't you dare act morally superior with me." Quinn stepped squarely between me and his mother. He pulled out his phone and played the audio from the night before. Derek's frantic voice echoed in our foyer. "Just tell them you were the one driving. Mom will take care of the rest." Lorraine's face instantly drained of color. Derek stumbled back half a step, looking like he'd just been slapped across the face. Quinn glared at his mother, his voice shaking with rage. "You say his future is long. What about my wife's future? What about her reputation? Her freedom? Is his future priceless? And my wife's worth nothing?" The room was dead silent. Lorraine opened her mouth to speak, but for the first time in her life, she couldn't find a single word to spin the narrative. I stood behind Quinn, my hands freezing, but my mind was clearer than ever. From this second on, I was done swallowing my pride. Because if I showed an ounce of weakness, the next person buried under my in-laws' sheer selfishness wouldn't just be a girl named Maya, it would be me. After Quinn's question, Lorraine stood frozen on our porch for a few seconds. Her face cycled from pale to flushed crimson, her lips parting as if to argue, but the audio recording had completely cornered her. I thought that finally, she'd feel an ounce of shame. I thought she would back down, or at least stay quiet out of humiliation. But I vastly underestimated her audacity. In the blink of an eye, her demeanor flipped. She grabbed Derek by the arm and yanked him down, forcing him to his knees on our concrete driveway, still damp with morning dew. Derek hit the ground hard, wincing in pain, but he didn't dare resist. Lorraine dropped to her knees right beside him, violently beating her chest with both hands. Her wails erupted, so piercing and shrill that the doors of the neighboring houses began to crack open. "Hannah, I am begging you," she sobbed theatrically, crawling toward me with her hands outstretched, trying to grab my ankles. "Save your brother just this once. He was stupid, not evil. He's just a boy. He was so scared he didn't know what he was saying." I instinctively took a step back, not out of fear, but out of sheer revulsion at how quickly she could pivot from a commanding tyrant to a groveling victim in a single breath. Her cries grew louder. It didn't sound like a mother weeping out of guilt for the victim, nor did it sound like someone mourning her son's mistakes. It was projected, intentionally amplified so the whole cul-de-sac could hear. Sure enough, moments later, neighbors began gathering at the edge of their lawns. Mrs. Higgins from next door, Dave the mailman, and a few others began whispering, "What's going on?" I heard Derek hit someone. "Why are they begging Hannah? Is she involved?" Their whispers clung to me like dirt. I understood Lorraine's tactic instantly. If she couldn't force me through family loyalty, she would force me using public pressure. She wanted the neighborhood to see her groveling at my feet. She wanted them to believe I was holding some secret over her head, that I possessed the power to save Derek, and thus, somehow, I was complicit in the accident. Quinn took a step forward, his voice cracking with fury. "Mom, stop this damn performance! Have you no shame?" Lorraine snapped her head up, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were glacial. Shut up. I am trying to save your brother. He is your flesh and blood. If you won't save him, I have to." She then pointed a shaking finger directly at me, her voice trembling but projecting perfectly. "And her. She doesn't share our blood. Why are you defending her over him?" The entire driveway went silent. With just one sentence, she had violently shredded the facade of family we had maintained for years. My heart pounded against my ribs. So, even in front of the neighbors, even in front of my husband, she could freely state that because I wasn't blood, I was entirely disposable. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. She kept going, no longer mincing words. "Your family is poor, Hannah. You can survive a few years in a cell. Your mother is used to struggling at the flea market. But if Derek gets a felony, his life is over. He is my youngest son. He is the last bit of pride this family has." I saw Derek looking down at the concrete. He didn't object. He didn't say, "Mom, stop doing this." He just knelt there, shoulders shaking, not out of remorse for the girl he nearly killed, but out of pure terror that his comfortable life was crumbling. In that driveway, the only person they hadn't spared a single thought for was Maya. Suddenly, my front door flew open. My mother, Martha, who had been staying in our guest room, marched out, still holding the broom she was using to sweep the kitchen. She was a petite woman, weathered by years of hauling produce, but right now, her eyes were burning with a fierce, protective rage. She stepped directly in front of me, her voice shaking with anger. "My daughter is not your family's sacrificial lamb. If you want to save your son, tell him to turn himself into the police. Do not ever weigh the poverty of my family against the sins of yours." Lorraine shrieked. "What do you know? Stay out of my family's business. You have no right to interfere." My mother gave a pained, bitter smile. "When you need her to go to prison for him, you call her your daughter-in-law. When it's time to treat her with respect, she's an outsider. Your family makes me sick." That shut the whispering neighbors up entirely. For the first time, Lorraine hesitated. But Derek, realizing he was backed into a corner, suddenly lunged forward, clutching my forearm. His fingernails dug into my skin. "Hannah, please, take the fall," he pleaded, his face a contorted mess of snot and tears, yet his eyes retained that familiar, sickening selfishness. "I swear I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. I'll buy your mom a house. Whatever you want, I'll pay you back." I looked dead at him. I ripped my hand away, my voice colder than I ever knew it could be. The human being bleeding in the ICU is not a stray dog you can throw money at. And my life isn't a cheap coat you can just wear and discard whenever it suits you. Derek stared at me in shock. Lorraine was about to lunge at me again, but just then, a slow, deep rumble echoed at the entrance of our street. A police cruiser rolled past, slowing down as it approached our house. I didn't know if they were here for the accident or just on routine patrol, but the second Derek saw those flashing lights, he panicked. He scrambled to his feet, stumbled backward, and bolted toward Lorraine's SUV parked by the curb. Lorraine yelled his name, but he ignored her. He threw himself into the back seat, slammed the door shut, and curled up into a ball. Lorraine stared after him, all the color draining from her face. Yet, before she ran to the driver's side, she turned to look at me one last time. There was no more begging in her eyes. It was pure, unadulterated venom. "Hannah," she hissed through her teeth, "if you don't save him, don't blame us for what happens next." I looked at her, then at Quinn. He stood in the middle of the driveway, rigid as a board, looking as though his own mother had just backhanded him. As for me, for the first time, her threats didn't scare me, because the moment she tried to trade my freedom for Derek's, whatever family loyalty I had left for her died completely. After Lorraine's SUV sped out of the neighborhood, the driveway retained a chilling atmosphere, as if a toxic wind had just swept through. The neighbors, realizing the show was over, slowly dispersed, but the looks they cast back at me made my skin crawl. I knew that by breakfast, the entire subdivision would be buzzing with rumors. People don't care about the whole truth. A few theatrical tears from Lorraine and the sight of Derek kneeling in my driveway were enough to spin a million wild conspiracies. Quinn closed the front door, his face ashen. He didn't say a word. He walked straight into the living room, pulled up the app for our Ring security cameras, and cast it to the TV. Since a recent string of package thefts, Quinn had installed a camera pointing at the driveway and the front porch. Normally, I barely paid attention to it. But that morning, watching the screen load made my heart pound out of my chest. Quinn scrubbed the timeline back to the previous night. The screen showed our empty, dark driveway, illuminated by the amber glow of the street lamp. Around 1:00 a.m., a figure stepped into the frame. The person was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, a dark mask covering his face, and a dark hoodie. He walked quickly but kept whipping his head around, checking his surroundings. I recognized the gait immediately. It sent a shiver down my spine. Quinn paused the video, zooming in. His voice was raspy. "It's Derek." I held my breath and watched. Derek didn't ring the doorbell. He didn't knock. He slinked over to where my red Vespa scooter was parked near the porch. He bent down quickly. At first, I thought he was trying to break the lock. He wasn't. He pulled a wad of paper towels from his pocket and began frantically wiping down the handles, the seat, the ignition. His movements weren't the erratic flailing of a panicked kid. They were deliberate, slow, and calculated. "What is he doing?" I whispered, terrified. Quinn didn't answer. He let the video play. Derek then reached toward a fake rock planter near the window, the exact spot where, months ago, I carelessly left a spare key in a magnetic box. Luckily, he didn't find it because Quinn had moved it weeks ago. Derek paused, wiped the ignition slot one last time, shoved the paper towels into his pocket, and vanished from the frame. Quinn watched the video finish, his hands shaking on the remote. He muttered, almost to himself. He was wiping away old prints to plant new ones. That sentence made my scalp tingle. I stumbled backward, feeling like the floor had dropped out beneath me. If I had listened to Derek and gone to his mother's house at 2:00 a.m., they absolutely would have found a way to make me touch the motorcycle, grab the handlebars, handle the keys. Or worse, they might have taken my scooter to the crime scene to stage a narrative that I was the rider who fled in terror. I remembered his exact words on the phone. "I just need you to be present." What he needed wasn't my help. He needed a fingerprint, a footprint, a caught-on-camera moment, a slip of the tongue, anything to transform me from a bystander into the prime suspect. I sank onto the sofa, my freezing hands clasped tightly together. "Quinn, if I had gone last night." He turned off the TV and looked at me. His eyes were red, but his tone was rock solid. Then today, the detectives would be knocking on our door first. The air in the house was suffocating. My mother stood behind us, still gripping the broom. She didn't speak. She just stared at the blank TV screen, her eyes filled with a terrifying mix of maternal grief and burning rage. A moment later, Quinn opened his phone, scrolled to an old text thread, and handed it to me. It was a message from Derek from a few days ago. "Bro, if I ever got into massive trouble, would you bail me out?" Quinn's reply was right below it. "Stop talking nonsense and get a real job." At the time, Quinn thought Derek was just whining about gambling debts again. But reading it now, it felt like the prologue to a premeditated disaster. Quinn sat across from me, burying his face in his hands. It took him a long time to finally speak. "There's something else I haven't told you," he said. I looked up. A heavy knot formed in my stomach. Quinn took a deep breath. For the last few months, Derek got tangled up with an underground street racing ring. At first, I thought it was just car meets. But he started betting, taking out loans from loan sharks. He owes a lot of money, Hannah. Almost $30,000. I was stunned. $30,000. To my in-laws, it was a hefty sum, but to an unemployed kid like Derek, it was a noose around his neck. Quinn explained that a loan shark had showed up at Arthur's lumber yard, screaming and making a scene. Lorraine, terrified of the public humiliation, sold her jewelry and took out shady payday loans to cover part of it. But plugging one hole only caused another to burst. The more she covered for him, the deeper he sank. So last night, I asked, was he running from his bookies? Quinn nodded, his voice cracking. Hank texted me an update. Witnesses saw Derek riding like a maniac before the crash. 2 cars were chasing him. He probably lost a bet and was running from his debtors. He was speeding like a lunatic and plowed right into Maya. I closed my eyes, swallowing a sob. An innocent girl dragged into a nightmare purely because of Derek's reckless degeneracy. And the moment he caused the tragedy, his and his mother's first instinct wasn't to call 911, it was to figure out how to pin the felony on me. The reality made me sick to my stomach. Just then, Quinn's phone buzzed. An anonymous text flashed on the screen. No name, no profile picture. Just one short sentence. It wasn't an accident. He hit her on purpose. All three of us froze. I looked at Quinn, he looked at me, and my mom gently placed a hand on my shoulder as if to keep me tethered to the ground. The living room was brightening with the morning sun, but I felt like I was standing in a freezing blizzard. If that text was true, this was no longer a case of reckless driving. It was something darker, cloaked in the guise of an accident. And I realized that from here on out, it wasn't just about whether or not I'd be framed. That anonymous text plunged the house into a suffocating silence. Initially, I tried to convince myself it was just a local troll spreading rumors. As messed up as Derek was, the word intentional carried a weight that transformed a tragedy into a calculated atrocity. Quinn sat opposite me, staring at the screen, his lips pressed so hard they were white. He said nothing, but I knew his mind was tearing itself apart. Around 9:00 a.m., just as Quinn and I were preparing to head to the hospital to check on Maya's condition, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the aggressive pounding of my in-laws, but a hesitant, timid ring. Quinn opened the door. Standing on the porch was a young woman, thin, hair tied up in a messy bun, her eyes swollen from crying. She clutched a canvas tote bag tightly to her chest, looking at us with a mix of panic and desperation. "Are you Hannah?" she asked, her voice shaking. I nodded. The girl immediately glanced over her shoulder, as if afraid someone was watching her, before stepping inside. As soon as she sat down, she introduced herself as Vivian, Maya's roommate. Hearing Maya's name made my chest tighten. "How is she, Vivian? Is she going to make it?" Vivian looked down, her knuckles white as she gripped her bag. "She's still in the ICU. The doctors won't let me see her. I came here because..." Right before the paramedics put her in the ambulance, she said your name. I froze. "My name?" Vivian nodded, tears immediately spilling over. "She didn't know your name exactly. She said, 'If anything happens to me, find Quinn's wife. She's the only one who won't cover for Derek.'" That sentence sent a massive shiver down my spine. Quinn, standing behind me, turned visibly pale. He asked softly, "Maya knows me?" Vivian looked at Quinn. "Yes. Derek brags about you guys at the club we work at. He'd say his older brother was a pushover, and his sister-in-law was poor trailer trash who was easy to manipulate." Maya heard it enough times to remember. My throat closed up. Even in his seedy hangouts, Derek used my background as a punchline, as leverage in his twisted mind. But what terrified me more was Vivian's eyes. She wasn't just here to relay a message from an accident victim. She was carrying a massive secret. Vivian took a deep breath. Maya wasn't just a random pedestrian. She works as a cocktail waitress at a lounge Derek and his crew frequent. She needed the money to send back to her mom in Ohio for medical bills. She worked the night shifts and did DoorDash in the mornings. A month ago, while cleaning a VIP room after a party, Maya accidentally caught Derek and his friends on video. They were doing coke, and then they beat a guy bloody just because he bumped into their table. She recorded it just to protect herself, afraid they'd blame her for the broken glass in the room. Vivian sobbed. Derek found out. Since then, he's been hounding her. At first, he tried to buy her off. He offered her thousands, even tried to give her his mom's gold necklace if she deleted the video. She refused. Not to blackmail him, but because she knew if she deleted it, she'd have no leverage if they came after her. Derek's tone changed. He started threatening her. Vivian pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots of texts Maya had saved. The messages made my blood run cold. "Don't think being a waitress makes you untouchable. Delete it or else. I know where your apartment is." And the final text, sent the evening before, "Meet me tonight. We end this." Vivian explained that Maya had arranged to meet a trusted friend that night to hand over a USB drive containing the video. She didn't want to hold it anymore. But somehow, Derek found out. He intercepted her on the deserted road near Lorraine's subdivision. They argued. A distant security camera caught it. There's no audio, but it shows Maya standing outside his car, slamming her hand on the window like she was demanding something back. Then Derek threw his door open, grabbed her hair, and tried to rip her bag away. I clamped a hand over my mouth. Quinn stood absolutely paralyzed, his eyes hollow, like a man watching someone he knew morph into a demon. Maya called me right before she met him. Vivian choked out. She said if she didn't come home tonight, I had to take the backup flash drive to the police. She also said. Derek wasn't the only one afraid of the video. His mother knew too. My heart pounded frantically. Lorraine knew? Vivian nodded, opening a short video on her phone. The frame was incredibly shaky, likely filmed while Maya was hiding. Under the sickly yellow glow of a street lamp, Maya's face appeared. Her hair a mess, her lips trembling violently. She was crying, whispering, but the words were crystal clear. Vivian, if something happens to me, Derek did it. He cornered me. His mom knows. She told me not to make a big deal out of this, or my family back home wouldn't be safe. A wave of pure dread washed over me. The room spun. So my in-laws weren't just covering up a DUI hit and run. They were covering up blackmail, assault, and narcotics. Derek used money and threats to silence a working-class girl. Lorraine knew and actively aided the intimidation. And when they couldn't bury it anymore, they tried to use me as the ultimate human shield. Quinn stumbled backward and fell into an armchair. He buried his face in his hands, his voice breaking. No. Derek wouldn't. But even he didn't believe it. The proof was right there. Vivian was sobbing. I just felt cold. Not fear, but the bone-deep realization of how utterly depraved a family can become when they believe their wealth and bloodline put them above the law. Before I could decide who to take the video to, my phone started buzzing relentlessly. The first call was from Quinn's aunt. I had a bad feeling, but I answered anyway. Before I could say hello, she unleashed a torrent of abuse. Hannah, how can you live with yourself? The family is in a crisis, and instead of helping, you're framing your brother-in-law to cover up your own filthy affairs? I was stunned. What are you talking about? She sneered. Playing dumb? Photos of you in a car with some strange man are all over the HOA Facebook group and the Nextdoor app. You're cheating on my nephew, and now you want to destroy Derek out of spite. Do you think we're stupid? My hands went numb. Quinn snatched the phone from me, opened the local Nextdoor app, and within seconds, his face darkened. A fake account had just posted a picture. It was a photo of me sitting in the passenger seat of a black sedan. Leaning intimately toward me was an older man. The caption read, Lorraine's daughter-in-law plays the innocent victim. Behind closed doors, she's sleeping with older men, and now she's framing her brother-in-law to get revenge on her husband's family. My heart seized. The man in the photo wasn't a stranger. It was Tyler, my former boss. 6 months ago, my car broke down in a massive thunderstorm. Tyler happened to drive by and gave me a ride to the mechanic. That was it. But the photo was perfectly cropped to capture the exact second he leaned over to hand me a tissue, making it look like a lover's embrace. Quinn zoomed in on the photo, his eyes blazing. This is photoshopped. Someone took this from across the street and cropped out the auto repair shop sign right in front of the car. I couldn't speak. My mind raced to one conclusion. Lorraine had made her move. She couldn't force me to confess. She couldn't break me with tears, so she launched a smear campaign. She wanted to brand me as an adulteress, so that any evidence I brought forward would look like the vindictive lies of a cheating wife. Once people believed I was unfaithful, they'd easily believe I framed Derek. Within hours, my phone practically exploded. Relatives texted vile things. A cheating whore is capable of anything. They took you out of the gutter, and this is how you repay them. Poor Lorraine. Having a daughter-in-law like you is a curse. I read a few lines and threw the phone down, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My mother sat next to me, her face pale with fury. She turned the phone face down. Stop reading it, sweetie. When they want to throw mud, looking at it only stains you more. But I wasn't hurt by the insults anymore. I was terrified. Terrified of how easily someone with a cropped photo and a few fake tears could incite a mob against me without anyone asking for the truth. Vivian stood there, her lip quivering. Hannah, is it because I brought the video? Did I cause this? I squeezed her hand. No, the ones at fault are the criminals and the people protecting them, not the ones telling the truth. But Lorraine's dirty tricks didn't stop there. By noon, we got word that she had dragged a group of relatives to the hospital where Maya was recovering. She wailed in the hallway, making sure the nurses and other families heard her. My son is a good boy. His evil sister-in-law brainwashed him. He was pushed to the brink and panicked. We are the victims here. Derek sat huddled in a waiting room chair, clutching his head, playing the role of the traumatized victim perfectly. Hearing this made me want to scream. The person fighting for her life in the ICU was Maya. The girl who was run down was Maya. Yet Lorraine had effortlessly cast her son as the victim and me as the mastermind. Quinn looked at me, his voice dropping low. I'm going to the hospital. I grabbed his arm. No. If you go now, they'll escalate it. We need to secure the evidence. She looked at the screen and burst into tears before even answering. It was the hospital. She put the phone to her ear, shaking violently. After a brief exchange, she looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, but this time it wasn't pure despair. Hannah, she gasped. Maya is awake. The room seemed to pause. Are you serious? I asked, my voice tight. She's awake? Vivian nodded frantically. The doctor said she's weak, but she's conscious. And the very first thing she did was ask to speak to the detectives. My chest hitched. A girl who had just returned from the brink of death opened her eyes and didn't ask for her family, didn't ask about her injuries, she demanded the police. That detail alone spoke volumes about the sheer terror Derek and Lorraine had inflicted on her. Quinn stood silently, his face a mixture of profound relief and agony. Maya waking up meant the truth would finally see the light of day, but it also meant his brother had nowhere left to hide. The news of Maya waking up spread like wildfire. Less than 30 minutes later, an acquaintance of Quinn called, whispering that Derek had just shattered a glass in Lorraine's living room. He had screamed, "That bitch isn't dead?" That wasn't the reaction of a kid who made a horrible mistake. That was the reaction of a predator terrified of a surviving witness. The caller also mentioned that Lorraine slapped Derek across the face, a loud, ringing slap. But she didn't hit him out of sympathy for Maya. She hit him because he was stupid, because he left too much evidence, because Maya waking up meant her entire web of lies was about to instantly unravel. I sat back, staring at Maya's video on Vivian's phone, then at the hateful texts lighting up my own screen. A chilling realization washed over me. Lorraine wasn't just sacrificing me to save Derek, she was saving herself. The blackmail, the cover-up, the staging of the accident, she was involved in all of it. And the moment Maya opened her eyes, the person with the most to lose wasn't Derek. It was my mother-in-law. After Maya woke up, the landscape shifted rapidly. Lorraine's vicious rumors still circulated online, and the hateful text messages hadn't entirely stopped, but they were no longer enough to obscure the truth rising to the surface. The police began bringing in everyone involved. Vivian was called in for a statement. The convenience store owner was re-interviewed, and the neighbors who heard the roaring engine at dawn were questioned. Derek, meanwhile, vanished from public view. He wasn't seen at his usual bars, nor was he speeding down the neighborhood streets. According to a neighbor, he had barricaded himself inside Lorraine's house, refusing to step outside. The gates were locked, the blinds drawn tight. The house looked less like a home and more like a bunker. Quinn tried to go over several times, but I stopped him. I knew he was torn, that the invisible cord of blood and family was still yanking at him. But right now, every misstep could be weaponized by his mother. I told him, if you want to help, you help by standing still and letting the truth speak for itself. The closer you get to her, the easier it is for her to pull you down with her. That night, as we turned off the lights to sleep, Quinn's phone vibrated. An unknown number. He stared at it for a moment, then answered on speaker. A raspy, older man's voice came through, speaking barely above a whisper. Is this Quinn? Lorraine's son? Quinn frowned. Yes. Who is this? The man paused before replying. My name is Tom. I used to be the overnight security guard at your mom's gated community. I quit a month ago, but something's been eating at me. If I don't say it, I'll take it to my grave. Quinn and I exchanged a look, my heart accelerating. What are you talking about? Quinn asked. Tom let out a heavy sigh. He explained that on the night of the accident, around 11:30 p.m., he was wrapping up his shift at the guardhouse. He saw Derek speed through the gates, looking utterly frantic. His hoodie was covered in dust, his hands shaking violently. Derek parked haphazardly, almost knocking over a decorative planter, and sprinted into Lorraine's house. Tom was about to walk over and tell him to move the car, but as he approached, he heard Lorraine screaming from inside. The living room window was cracked open, and her voice carried perfectly. You idiot! I told you to leave that girl alone. Why did you corner her? Hearing that gave me full-body goosebumps. Quinn gripped the phone tighter. Tom's voice dropped even lower. I didn't hear everything, but I heard Derek crying, saying, Mom, she's still breathing. What do I do? And your mother? She said something that still makes my blood run cold. Quinn's voice was gravel. What did she say? Tom recited the words precisely. If the cops ask, We drag Hannah into it. She's just a daughter-in-law. At worst, you guys divorce. But if you go to prison, I lose my son. The bedroom turned into a freezer. I sat perfectly still, my hands numb. Even though I already knew how toxic Lorraine was, even though I had heard her demand I take the fall in my own driveway, knowing that this was her premeditated plan formulated while Maya was still bleeding out on the asphalt felt like a physical blow to the chest. She hadn't just spoken in the heat of the moment. She had done the math. Derek is blood, Hannah is an accessory. I could lose my reputation, my marriage, my freedom, as long as her golden boy walked free. The cruelty wasn't in her anger. It was in her chilling, sociopathic pragmatism. Tom continued. I was so scared I pulled out my phone and recorded a bit of it. I thought they were plotting a murder. When I saw the news about the hit and run and saw people dragging your wife's name through the mud online, I realized how sick this was. Quinn sat dead still. He couldn't force a single word out. I watched my husband, the man who had pulled me back from the door that night, who stood up to his mother now forced to listen to a stranger, confirm that his own mother had plotted to destroy his wife. Tom promised to text the audio file but warned Quinn to be careful. I'm an old man, I don't want any trouble. But I have a daughter too. If my little girl was being thrown under the bus like that, I'd haunt them from the grave. He hung up. Seconds later, the audio file arrived. Quinn pressed play. There was static, wind, and distant traffic. But Lorraine's voice pierced through, horrifyingly clear. Don't say a damn word to the cops. If it gets bad, you say Hannah called you out there. She's a woman, she's married to your brother. I'll force her to confess. She won't dare fight me. Then Derek's sniveling voice. What if she refuses? Lorraine's response was immediate. She doesn't have a choice. Her family is poor. Her mother sells vegetables at the flea market. You think she has the spine to go to war with me? I didn't just have goosebumps. I felt nauseous. I thought about those 20 missed calls at 2:00 a.m., the text demanding I come over, her berating me about my duty. None of it was to save anyone's life. It was the final step to lure me into the slaughterhouse she had prepared for me. Suddenly, the suffocating silence of our house was shattered by a violent pounding on our front door. Not a doorbell, not a knock. It was the frantic, desperate hammering of a trapped animal. Quinn jumped up. I followed him to the foyer, my chest tight. He opened the door. Derek practically fell inside. His face was chalk white, his hair wild, his eyes bloodshot from sleep deprivation. He collapsed to his knees in front of me, clasping his hands together, his voice cracking. Hannah, save me please, I'm so scared. Mom told me if the cops come, I should blame you, but I can't do it anymore. I don't want to die in a cell. Hannah, please. Before I could even process what he was saying, 2 men in plain clothes stepped onto our porch behind him. One of them flashed a badge and spoke in a calm, authoritative voice. Derek, you need to come with us. Derek went into a full meltdown. He lunged forward and wrapped his arms around my legs, sobbing hysterically like a toddler. Don't let them take me. Tell them I didn't do it. I don't want to go to jail. Hannah, please! I looked down at the boy who had conspired to send me to prison in his place. I didn't feel pity, and I didn't feel rage. I just felt a cold, hollow emptiness. I slowly pried his fingers off my legs and took a step back. I wasn't being cruel, but some fires you light yourself, and you have to burn in them alone. The 2 detectives hauled Derek to his feet. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Derek screamed for his mother, for Quinn, and for me. But no one could save him now. I watched him being dragged out of my house, his shadow stretching long and distorted under the amber streetlights. And in that moment, I knew Derek's arrest wasn't the end of this. Because the architect of the 2:00 trap the woman who decided my life was cheaper than her son's convenience was still out there. The real war between my mother-in-law and me was just beginning. By the time Derek was dragged down the driveway, half the neighborhood was awake. Porch lights flicked on, doors cracked open, and the shuffling of slippers grew louder. I stood on my porch, hands freezing, watching Derek stumble toward the unmarked police car. But I didn't feel the relief I expected. I knew Derek. He wasn't the type to go down quietly. He was used to being saved, used to a safety net appearing whenever he jumped off a ledge. Quinn walked down the driveway, his voice hoarse. Derek, just tell them the truth. Stop making it worse. Derek, who had his head down, suddenly stopped. He turned his head slowly, his bloodshot eyes locking onto his brother, then me. The panic in his eyes was gone. What replaced it was the look of a man falling off a cliff, desperately trying to grab onto the collar of whoever was standing on the edge. He let out a dry, manic laugh that sounded worse than his sobbing. "You think you're so pure?" he screamed, his voice echoing down the cul-de-sac. "Mom was right. You're all fakes. You just want me to rot in there alone." Quinn stepped forward to shut him up, but a detective held him back. Derek, realizing he had an audience, screamed even louder. "Hannah paid Maya's hospital bills. Why don't you talk about that? Why don't you tell them you wired $5,000 to the hospital right after the crash?" The entire street gasped. The whispers erupted like a disturbed beehive. I stood paralyzed. It was true. That morning, when Vivian told me Maya was in the ICU and needed a deposit for emergency surgery, I had transferred $5,000 to the hospital. I didn't know Maya, but I couldn't sit by while a young girl's life was destroyed by my husband's family. I thought simply, save a life first, figure out the rest later. But now, Derek had weaponized my humanity, twisting it into a noose around my neck. Derek saw my shock and smirked. "See? If you aren't involved, why are you paying her bills? You're paying hush money because you're guilty." A neighbor standing near my mailbox murmured loudly. "He's right. Nobody gives $5,000 to a total stranger." That single comment acted like a spark in dry brush. Once doubt is planted, people will contort anything to fit a scandalous narrative. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but a piercing wail echoed from the end of the street. Lorraine came sprinting down the road, her hair flying, her cardigan falling off one shoulder. I don't know how long she had been watching, but her timing was so impeccable it chilled my blood. She collapsed right at the edge of my driveway, clutching her chest, weeping as if her heart had been ripped out. "Oh my God. My family is being destroyed by this manipulative bitch. My poor son." Quinn shouted, "Mom, what lies are you spinning now?" Lorraine didn't look at Quinn. She pointed a shaking finger directly at me, her voice ragged but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've suspected it for a long time. She and Derek have an inappropriate relationship, calling each other in the middle of the night, and now she's wiring money to the girl he hit? What kind of good wife is involved in her brother-in-law's dirty business like this?" I stopped breathing. That was the most vile, disgusting accusation she had hurled at me yet. From trying to frame me for the crash, to posting fake photos calling me an adulteress, she was now trying to paint a picture of an incestuous affair between me and Derek. If that rumor took root, my reputation would be buried under a mountain of filth. Quinn lost his mind. He charged at his mother, grinding his teeth. "Shut your mouth. Are you even human?" Lorraine looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, her eyes cold as ice. "I am saving this family. You let this whore blind you." Derek leaned against the police car, offering no defense for me. He just smirked a weak, cowardly little smirk. I realized then that they didn't need their lies to make logical sense. They just needed to sow enough doubt to muddy the waters. Once I looked dirty, my truth would look dirty too. Right in the middle of the chaos, a female detective approached me. She was young, her expression stern, her eyes sharp but not aggressive. "Ma'am, I need to ask you, did you transfer funds to the victim Maya at the hospital today?" I nodded, my throat parched. "Yes, I was told she was in the ICU. I just wanted to help with the emergency deposit." She stared at me for a few seconds, her voice perfectly level. "Did you pay that out of charity, or were you attempting to mitigate liability for someone?" The question felt like a slap. I knew she was doing her job, tracing the money in a criminal investigation. But standing there, surrounded by judging neighbors, Lorraine's fake sobbing, and Derek's twisted smirk, I felt like I was being pushed into an abyss. I did something out of conscience, and in the hands of evil people, it became the ultimate proof of my guilt. I looked the detective dead in the eye and kept my voice steady. "I have the bank receipts. I have the text logs with her roommate. I paid it after I found out she was dying, not because I was involved. I will give you access to everything." She nodded and didn't press further, but the coldness lingered. I knew from that moment, I wasn't just a bystander who narrowly escaped being framed. I was a link in the chain. I would have to explain, prove, and defend every single breath I took. Derek was finally pushed into the cruiser. Before the door slammed shut, he looked back at me one last time. No tears, no begging, just a smirk. He wasn't planning on going down alone. And behind him, Lorraine was still sitting on the pavement, crying for the audience, having successfully planted the ugliest seeds of doubt into everyone's minds. After the police cruisers pulled away, Quinn tried to remain calm to soothe me. He poured me a glass of warm water, set it on the coffee table, and said softly, "Don't let it get to you. We have the recordings. We have Vivian's statement. Maya is awake. Everything will come to light." I stared at the steam rising from the mug, unable to settle my racing heart. For some reason, the further this went, the more I felt a different kind of fog rolling in. It was thin, but freezing and suffocating. I thought back to that night at 2:00 a.m. How fast Quinn grabbed my wrist. How quickly he locked the door. How immediately he hid the car keys. He told me to record Derek, told me not to argue, just to let him talk. At the time, I thought my husband was just incredibly sharp, acting quickly because he knew exactly how toxic his mother and brother were. But analyzing everything that had happened since the deleted camera footage, the lies, the sheer calculation, I began to fear that hypervigilance. I blamed myself for being paranoid. He was the man who stood in front of his mother to protect me. How could I doubt him? But a woman's intuition, once she's nearly been shoved into a trap, is a razor blade. Tiny inconsistencies were scratching at my heart, and the more I tried to ignore them, the deeper they cut. That night, around midnight, when we were both dead on our feet, my phone lit up. It was Vivian. I assumed she had an update on Maya and answered immediately. "Hannah," Vivian whispered, her voice shaking so badly I could hear her taking shallow breaths. "I just heard something, and I don't know if I should tell you." I sat up straight. Quinn was out on the balcony taking a call, his back to me. I lowered my voice. "What is it? Tell me." Vivian went silent for a few seconds before saying, "The convenience store security footage from the crash. 17 minutes of it are missing. The most crucial 17 minutes right after Maya was hit, before the ambulance got there." My chest tightened. "Missing? Like the owner deleted it?" "No, it didn't just disappear," Vivian whispered frantically. "Someone went to the store and asked to see the footage before the cops got there. He said he was a family member and just wanted to see what happened to ease his mind. After he left, those 17 minutes were gone." My ears started ringing. "Who was it?" Vivian didn't answer right away. My phone buzzed. A photo came through. I opened it, and in that split second, the blood in my veins turned to ice. The man in the photo, captured by an overhead store camera, was wearing a dark button-down shirt and a baseball cap. He was standing by the register. Even from the side profile, I knew him instantly. It was Quinn. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the hardwood floor with a loud clatter. Quinn heard the noise and turned around. He looked at my face, then at the glowing screen on the floor. In that moment, I saw it clearly. He wasn't surprised. He just closed his eyes, exhaling heavily, like a man who knew the final door had just been kicked open. I picked up the phone, walked right up to my husband, and asked, my voice trembling but sharp, "Why were you at the convenience store?" Quinn said nothing. I asked again. "The missing 17 minutes. Did you delete it?" He stood in silence for a long time. Out on the balcony, the night wind blew the sheer curtains, but inside my chest, a hurricane was ripping me apart. Finally, Quinn sat down heavily on a dining chair, lacing his fingers together. His voice was raw. "I didn't delete it to save Derek." I let out a bitter laugh, my eyes burning. "Then who did you delete it for? To save yourself?" He looked up at me, his eyes red and pleading. "To save you." I was paralyzed. That was the most absurd thing I had ever heard. "To save me? You tampered with evidence at a crime scene and you're telling me it was to save me?" Quinn swallowed hard. He explained that the deleted 17 minutes didn't just show Derek hitting Maya. It showed the aftermath. Lorraine arrived at the scene before anyone else. In that footage, Maya was still moving. Lorraine didn't call 911. She crouched down, shook Derek, looked around, and then physically dragged Maya closer to the curb to make it look like a random hit and run from a different angle. Then she pointed down an alley and yelled at Derek, "Run! Don't stand here waiting to die." Hearing that made the hair on my arms stand up. A mother, to protect her son, looked at a bleeding, dying girl on the pavement and chose to let her bleed out. "Then why didn't you keep it?" I asked, my voice cracking. "That's evidence." Quinn slammed his fist on the table, tears finally spilling over. "Because it's evidence that would put my mother in prison. Do you understand, Hannah? She'd be charged with accessory, tampering, reckless endangerment. I only have one mother. I stumbled back, looking at him like he was a total stranger. What about Maya? What about me? You deleting that video means you're an accessory too. Quinn buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. It was the first time in 4 years of marriage I had seen him cry like a child, but his tears didn't soften my heart. Behind those tears were 17 deleted minutes, a buried truth, a girl's life valued less than his family's blood. I thought that was the final, fatal blow. But Quinn looked up, his voice so quiet I had to hold my breath to hear it. There's something else. I looked at him, my heart stopping. The first person who suggested Derek call you that night wasn't my mom, it was me. All sound vanished from the room. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I stared at the man in front of me, the man who had grabbed my wrist, the man who had stood between me and his mother. He had actually, for a fleeting moment, thought about sending me into that trap. I realized then that the truth doesn't just stab you once. It peels you apart, layer by layer, slowly and agonizingly, until you don't even recognize the person sleeping next to you. I couldn't believe my own ears. The man who protected me, it turns out, was the one who almost served me up on a silver platter. The pain of that realization eclipsed every insult Lorraine had ever thrown at me. She hated me because I wasn't blood. But Quinn, I trusted him with my life. Quinn slumped in the chair, clutching his head. His words came out broken, dragged from the back of his throat. When Derek first called me, he was hysterical. He said he hit someone. He said Mom was panicking and told me to figure something out. My mind went totally blank, Hannah. I just thought, I have to protect my family. I stood perfectly still. He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot. I thought if you went over there, you could handle it. You're calmer than me. You know how to talk to the police. I thought you could help call the ambulance and smooth things over. He paused, swallowing hard. But I know I'm lying to myself. The truth is, I wanted to use you as a shield. My chest throbbed with a dull, agonizing ache. His confession wasn't loud or violent, but it obliterated the deepest foundations of my trust. And if I had gone, I whispered, are you absolutely sure you would have protected me? Quinn looked down. His silence was the only answer I needed. I let out a soft, hollow laugh that didn't sound like my own voice. You weren't sure, were you? His voice shook. I snapped out of it halfway there. I drove over to Mom's house. But when I got to the gate, I heard her and Derek talking. Mom said, if the cops ask, drag Hannah in. She's not blood. At worst, you divorce her. But if Derek goes to jail, I lose a son. Quinn closed his eyes, a tear rolling down his cheek. That sentence woke me up. I realized if you stepped foot on that street, my family would bury you alive. They wouldn't leave you a single way out. I stared at him for a long, long time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to ask why it took hearing his mother explicitly plan my demise for him to realize my worth. But the words died in my throat. The truth was laid bare. He was selfish. He had wavered. He had put me on a scale against his mother and brother, and only at the final second did his conscience tip the balance enough to pull me back. Quinn broke down, no longer trying to hide it. I'm sorry. I was incredibly selfish. But I'm not evil enough to let my wife go to prison for my brother. I know nothing I say makes it better. But if I didn't tell you the truth, I could never look you in the eye again. I sat down in the chair across from him. Feeling completely, my mind flashed through the years of marriage, every family dinner where Lorraine insulted me, every time Derek crossed the line, every time Quinn told me to just let it go. Quinn loved me, but he was always one step behind my pain. When I was humiliated, he told me to endure. When Derek sinned, he said he'd handle it later. He had never firmly stood by my side until the situation crossed the boundaries of human decency. I looked at my husband with entirely different eyes. He was still Quinn, but the pedestal I had put him on had cracked straight down the middle. Thank you for stopping me that night, I said slowly. But I can never forget that you thought about sending me out there. There are some things I need time to swallow, and some things I might never be able to swallow for the rest of my life. The air in the room was so heavy that the slightest sound would make you jump. And exactly then, the doorbell rang. Rapid, consecutive rings. Not the violent pounding of Derek, not the timid buzz of Vivian. It was a cold, calculated ringing someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Quinn wiped his face and stood up. I followed. Looking at the Ring camera screen, I saw Lorraine standing on the porch. This time, she wasn't crying. Her hair was perfectly styled, she wore a dark tailored coat, and her lips were pressed into a tight line. Her eyes were dead and calm. She wasn't here to beg. Quinn opened the door. She walked in, ignoring Quinn. Ignoring my mother standing in the hallway. She walked straight to the coffee table, dropped her designer handbag, and threw down a stack of glossy photographs. The pictures fanned out across the glass table. I looked down, and the blood froze in my veins. The photos were of my mother, Martha, at the farmer's market. She was carrying a crate of vegetables, her familiar small frame navigating the crowded aisles. Right behind her, two large, thuggish men were tailing her closely. Another photo showed a rough-looking man leaning against her produce stand, smoking a cigarette, staring directly at her. The final photo was of my mother standing right in front of our house, the address numbers clearly visible. I snapped my head up. You had my mother followed. Lorraine sat down on the sofa, as casually as if she were here for afternoon tea. Her voice was slow, deliberate, and icy. Your mother is getting old, Hannah. Working at that market alone is dangerous. I just hired some people to keep an eye on her. Quinn slammed his hand on the table. Mom, what the hell are you doing? Lorraine glanced at him, a cold smirk on her face. I want your wife to understand something. Don't think a few audio recordings and a couple of witnesses are enough to push this family off a cliff. She turned her dead eyes to me, stripping away the last ounce of humanity. Hannah, if you won't save Derek, fine. But remember, poor people who work on the streets, sometimes a little accident is all it takes to ruin their lives forever. My hands and feet went numb. This wasn't begging. This wasn't a smear campaign. This was a threat. And her target wasn't me anymore. It was my mother. I stared at the photos. My mom in her faded sweater, her back slightly hunched from decades of hard labor. A woman who never fought with anyone, never owed a dime, being dragged into this filthy mafia-style blackmail just because her daughter married into the wrong family. Lorraine leaned back, utterly unbothered. No more tears for the neighbors. She took off the mask entirely. Maya isn't dead, she said slowly. Which means this is salvageable. What do you want? I choked out. Lorraine smirked. You confess that you were the one who called Maya out there that night. I leaped to my feet. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. What are you talking about? She didn't flinch. You tell the police you were jealous. You thought Maya was sleeping with Quinn, so you told Derek to go intimidate her. Derek was just your pawn. He's young. His evil sister-in-law manipulated him into a frenzy, and things got out of hand. She looked up at me, calculating. You do a few years. Our family will wire money to your mother's account. When you get out, you'll be financially set. I stood completely paralyzed. I could not fathom a mother-in-law capable of speaking those words with such casual indifference. She didn't just want me to take the fall for a hit and run. She wanted to fabricate a vile, disgusting motive. She wanted to paint me as a psychotic, jealous wife who orchestrated an attack on an innocent girl, turning Derek into an innocent tool. Quinn screamed, his voice cracking. Mom, you belong in a psych ward. Lorraine whipped her head toward him, eyes flashing. If I'm crazy, it's because of this family. Because of your brother. And you? I didn't give birth to you so you could side with a trailer trash outsider and throw your own flesh and blood under the bus. Quinn stood frozen. The cruelty of that statement was so absolute he couldn't even formulate a response. Lorraine turned back to me, her tone dropping to absolute zero. Your family is poor. Your mom works a fruit stand. You can survive a few years in a cell. But if Derek goes to prison, my family loses everything. His father could never show his face in town. Quinn's reputation is ruined. I would have no reason to live. My whole body trembled. Not out of fear, but pure, unadulterated hatred. All these years, I thought they just looked down on me because I didn't have money. Now I understood that to Lorraine, my poverty was the exact currency she could use to buy my life. Because I was poor, I should take the hit. Because my mom sold vegetables, she could be threatened. Because I didn't have powerful lawyers backing me, I was supposed to bow my head and go to prison. I looked at her, the words tearing from my raw throat. You make it sound so easy. A few years of my life, my reputation, my mother's safety. You put a price tag on all of it? Lorraine scoffed. What reputation do you have left? Do you think the neighborhood believes you or me? I just have to mention your little affair with your boss, your insane jealousy over Maya, and the money you wired her. People love a scandal. Once they think you're dirty, even if you're clean, you're stained forever. It was a sickening reality. She knew the power of rumors. With a fake photo and a few fake tears, she had weaponized suburban gossip to destroy me. Right as I felt I couldn't breathe from the rage, slow footsteps approached from the kitchen. My mother, Martha, walked into the room. None of us knew how long she had been standing there. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning with a ferocity I had never seen. Her hands were still wet from doing the dishes. She walked right up to Lorraine. Lorraine sneered. Great timing, Martha. Tell your daughter to be smart. Poor folks need to know how to survive. Before anyone could blink, my mother raised her hand and slapped Lorraine across the face with everything she had. Smack. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the living room. The whole house went dead silent. Quinn froze. I stopped breathing. Lorraine clutched her cheek, her eyes bulging, unable to process that a woman who sold tomatoes for a living just struck her. My mother's voice shook. But her words were iron. My daughter is poor, but she is not spineless like your family. She is poor, which is exactly why she knows the value of a human life. You might have a few more dollars than us, but your soul is cheap and pathetic, Lorraine shrieked, lunging forward to attack my mom. You bitch! I'll destroy you! Quinn lunged and restrained his mother. I pulled my mom back. The tension in the room was a taut wire about to snap. Lorraine thrashed in Quinn's arms, screaming, I'll bury both of you. You'll see what I can do. But before she could finish, the screech of tires breaking hard outside stopped us all. Through the front window, I saw a massive black Cadillac Escalade stop abruptly in front of our house. The doors opened, and a middle-aged man stepped out. He was tall, his face weathered by exhaustion, but his eyes were terrifyingly sharp. Behind him were two men in tailored suits carrying briefcases. Lorraine saw the man through the window. Instantly, all the color drained from her face. The rabid, aggressive woman from 5 seconds ago vanished. She stumbled back, her lips trembling, unable to form a word. Quinn frowned, looking out the window. Who is that? Before I could answer, Vivian came running from the kitchen, her eyes red. She looked out the window and choked out, That's Maya's dad. The room fell into an absolute hush. But this time, the silence didn't belong to Lorraine. It felt like the heavy, suffocating calm right before a lightning strike. Seeing Lorraine's terrified face, I knew instantly that the man walking up my driveway was not someone she could manipulate with fake tears or neighborhood gossip. The man walked into the house, his expression as cold as ice. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things or threaten anyone, but his terrifying calmness made the air in the room unbreathable. Following him were the two men in suits, clearly high-priced attorneys and a uniformed police officer. Just looking at that entourage, I knew this had escalated far beyond a family dispute. Lorraine backed up, her hands shaking so badly she gripped the back of a chair. I finally understood who this man was. He was Mr. Ford, Maya's father. He owned a massive chain of auto repair shops and a regional trucking company. What shocked me was that Maya had never told anyone. She worked as a waitress, lived in a cramped apartment with Vivian, and ran DoorDash just to be independent and pay her own way. Even Derek, in all his arrogance, had no idea the girl he was terrorizing came from a family with infinitely more power than his own. Mr. Ford didn't look at Lorraine right away. He walked over to the coffee table, pulled a small silver USB drive from his pocket, and dropped it onto the glass. He finally looked up, his voice a low rumble. Did you really think deleting a convenience store camera would save you? The room was paralyzed. Quinn stood absolutely still, his face ghostly pale. I looked at my husband, knowing he realized exactly what was on that drive. One of the lawyers plugged the USB into a laptop he brought and opened the screen so we could all see. A few seconds later, a video played. It was dashcam footage from a commercial delivery truck parked just down the street from the accident. The angle was a bit far, but the night vision caught everything in horrifying detail. I heard Lorraine suck in a sharp breath the moment the video showed Derek dragging Maya by her hair on the empty road. Maya fought back weakly, clutching her bag to her chest. Derek violently yanked the bag. In the struggle, the red motorcycle, left idling in gear, lurched forward and slammed into her. Maya hit the pavement and stopped moving. I dug my nails into my palms, but that wasn't the worst part. A few minutes later, Lorraine's SUV pulled up. The camera caught her running out. She grabbed Derek's face, frantically looking around. Then, she walked over to Maya. The audio from the dashcam was faint, but enhanced. "Is she breathing?" Derek cried. And Lorraine's voice, cold enough to freeze hell over. "Run. Don't stand here waiting to die." No one spoke. The video kept playing, but I couldn't hear the ambient noise anymore. I watched the screen as Lorraine grabbed Maya's arms and dragged her bleeding body toward the curb, staging her like a piece of garbage, before shoving Derek into the SUV and peeling out, leaving a dying girl alone in the dark. The lawyer snapped the laptop shut. The house was dead quiet. Lorraine collapsed into a chair, as if her spine had been removed. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her face was ashen, her eyes completely glazed over. Quinn stood a few feet away, rigid. I saw tears streaming down his face, but he made no move to wipe them. It was the moment a son watches his own mother abandon a dying girl just to save her own skin. Mr. Ford finally turned to look at me. His eyes were exhausted, the eyes of a father who almost had to bury his child. He spoke slowly. "I know you had nothing to do with this. I know they tried to frame you." He paused, looking around the room with disgust. "But my daughter almost died because of this family." I bowed my head, a massive lump in my throat. I didn't know what to say. An apology wasn't enough. Because even though I didn't run her over, the horror originated from my husband's bloodline. The police officer stepped forward. He looked down at Lorraine and spoke with professional severity. "Ma'am, I need you to step outside. You are being detained for questioning regarding obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and leaving the scene of an accident with serious bodily injury." Lorraine snapped out of her trance. She burst into hysterical tears and lunged for Quinn, grabbing his shirt. "Quinn, call our lawyer. Save me. I did it for your brother. I couldn't let him go to prison." She sobbed until her voice broke, her hands clinging to her son like a drowning woman. Quinn stood completely still for a long time. Then, very slowly, he peeled her fingers off his shirt. The gesture was gentle, but I knew that to him it was a profound, agonizing severing of ties. Quinn looked at his mother, his eyes red and raw, his voice hoarse. "From the moment you tried to send my wife to prison to take the fall for Derek, you stopped being my mother." Lorraine froze in shock. I had never seen a person age a decade in a single second. Her shoulders slumped, and the light vanished from her eyes. But it was too late. Some words, once spoken, can never be taken back. Some actions, once committed, can never be undone. Outside, the neighbors had gathered again. This time, no one was whispering. They just stood in silence, watching Lorraine being escorted to the back of a police cruiser. The woman who had spent her life bragging about her wealth, who looked down on my mother for being poor, who thought money and blood could erase any sin, was now being hauled away in handcuffs in front of the entire subdivision. Later, I heard that Derek completely broke down in holding when he found out his mother had been arrested. He banged his head against the wall, sobbing for his mom. But this time, no one was coming to bail him out. As for me, I stood on the porch, watching the police cars turn the corner and disappear. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt a deep, piercing cold. It was the cold realization that some families look perfect on the outside, wealthy, warm, and united. But the moment disaster strikes, they will gladly push their own flesh and blood off a cliff to save themselves. And the most painful part isn't being attacked by a stranger. The most painful part is realizing that, to the people you called family, your life was never worth as much as theirs to begin with.